On Friday nights, the counselors did a fantastic display where they had drums beating, and the counselors would come on riding on horses, doing, different running back and forth across each other. And they had these torches that were filled with kerosene and lit, and so they were blazing, and the guys would jump off the horses, and then they'd hand the torch. I think they'd hand the torch off to the next guy, who would then run with the torch down the field into the water area, up to the top of the slide, because we had two big slides at the waterfront. And when they got to the top of the slide, they'd go down the slide and would, with these torches, and would, of course, spray out through the water, and then the torches would go dead. Poof. And there could be more to that story, but that's what I remember. I would take some other camper that has that memory to finish that story, but that's what I remember. I remember also that when the kids came, the boys that year, they came back and had been eating peanut butter all week. And of course, they were not happy. And so on Friday night, when the girls had all been rehearsing a song for the boys who had come from their camping trip, and we sang it, and it's peanut butter goes on your bread, not your dish, you dope, use your head. And then it goes on, and that's the part I remember. There was also, in those meetings, many children came to know Jesus. And one of the ways we demonstrated, at night, we would have a big campfire at the top of what they called Mount Carmel, and each cabin had its own bench. And so they would go there and sit, and there would be a speaker, and we'd sing songs. And then there was an opportunity, if you would like to give your heart to Jesus, you can do that. And the kids would go forward if that's what they had decided to do. And at the end, the last night, they were invited to come and give a public demonstration of that they had given their heart to the Lord. And so they could walk down to the lake from the hill, and there on the side of the lake were little boats with candles in them. The boat was made of paper, cardboard, I don't know what it was, but it was some boat that was probably an ice cream boat or something, and my parents had found these. And they in each boat there was a candle. So they lit the candle, and then they would pick up their boat and put it in the lake, and then the candles would just float all over the lake. And they would sing songs as they did that. And at the end of the evening, after all the kids had gone to bed, the counselors would go down in the lake and fish out the boats, because they were afraid they might cause fires. And they usually came back with most of them, but we never had a forest fire ever. One of my mother's, one of our favorite things to let the kids do was to go to stay out on the island. And that was a privilege. If your cabin was good and they got the most points, the reward was for them to go stay on the island. And so the cabin would go out there, and they'd set up their sleeping bags on the ground and sleep overnight and look at the stars and talk about whatever kids talk about, probably tell ghost stories. And anyway, it was a really lovely way for the kids to enjoy that experience of this little adventure going across the lake in the boat at night and setting up, how that would go for children. It was quite fun. Later, when someone else took over the camp, they asked if they could use, because my parents eventually bought that island because the camp was using it all the time. And the board who who owned the camp didn't want to buy the island. So my mom and dad said, well, we're going to keep using it, so we might as well buy it ourselves. So that's what they did. And anyway, so later, the camp, when it was directed by someone else, they asked if they could use the island for kids to come out and camp. And my mom was like, sure, this is a privilege. We want the kids. That was a wonderful experience for all the kids at camp. When we were the directors, we'd love for them to have this experience. Well, it wasn't long before my mother found out that the kids that were staying out on the island, they were staying there because it was a punishment. And that, my friends, was the end of the kids staying on the island. No way was staying on the island gonna be a punishment. It was a privilege and a joy to be able to come out and stay on this little 1-acre island. And later, I'll tell you about that later, but later we actually built a house on that island. So that is the end of chapter 2. When I talk about the camp and the different things, like for instance, the kiosk, I want you to know that every building was decorated with unique decorations. The kiosk was very much Scandinavian. The teepees all had Indian symbols, each one painted differently with different things on them. If you thought of any there was that shed that was down from the house, had 2 great big roosters, a rooster and a chicken painted on it. The barn had something painted on the side of it, maybe a donkey, or I don't even remember what was on that barn. But there was not a building that was not finely decorated. And in the dining room, for instance, they had a birthday cart, and this little birthday cart, the wheels each of the spokes were carefully painted and decorated by my mother. And she, made sure that each thing was beautiful and fun. And both of my parents loved to decorate, and every aspect of camp was just very detailed and beautiful. And one missionary said, one thing about the Clarks, they were over the top. And that's probably true. They were very over the top in everything they did. If they were going to decorate something, they did a beautiful job of it. I mean, when my sister got married, my dad put in a whole garden at the front of the church. It was beautiful. But that's just the way they did things. When people would come for dinner, they would, decorate the house to make it, for instance, Japanese dinner. They'd have tables that are on the, close to the floor, and just detailed decorations just for dinner, which is just the way they were, and the passion they had for decorating. So when you imagine those things, imagine them with fine detail and fun decorations, and it really made the camp unique. We also had, every year we would put a display in the Paulsbo Parade, and one year we put a Viking ship. There were little girls all dressed up with Viking, little Norwegian outfits, and we danced down the road, did something with sticks and danced down the road. And then behind us came this great big Viking ship with a dragon head, and it and the tail out the back with a great big sail, and the shields were all individually painted with different designs. And I mean, it was a fantastic display, and all done on a dime. I mean, these people had a knack. My dad could make something out of nothing. And he grew up in the Depression, so he knew how to make things with nothing. And in fact, when he died, I ended up cleaning off our island, and I put 17 rafts full of stuff. Because, for instance, he would collect light bulbs. Someone would be having a sale, and at the end of the sale, he'd say, well, if you're not selling all those lights, do you mind if I just take a barrel of those home? And then during the winter, when he was retired, he would just go through each one of those lights and find the good ones, and then find the good cord and string them all back on the the electrical cord, and then make some big fantastic display out on the lake. One year he made an angel, and it stood probably 9-10 feet tall, and it had these great big wings with lights all the way around the outside of them. And the neighbor said to my dad, what's that big old bat you got over there? I think Dad was a little offended, but he had made this beautiful angel with all these lights, and had, made this big statue and covered it with cloth, and then put all the lights on it. And, he'd spend a couple months during the wintertime planning what displays he was going to put out on the lake for everyone to see. So they just went over the top with many, many things, and especially at the camp, they just went out of their way to really do a beautiful job of decorating.